the one will only win if its story wins. So moving on to Ambassador Nagmana Hashmi Saiba, who has served as a Pakistan's ambassador to China, and she definitely knows much more as she has been practitioner of diplomacy, as you were mentioning. So, Madam, what would you like to say about the book? And since you have been there, so please do share with us on Chinese soft power.
Thank you very much. To begin with, let me compliment Bilal Saab for writing a very readable book. I must confess, I haven't read it cover to cover, but I have gone through most of the chapters and most of the important elements in the chapter. And I think he's very clear, very lucid, and very understandable. So when you read it, it is not difficult. It's not really very heavy or whatever. So it's a very straightforward book, which I think will make a lot of people read it and learn from it. And I must also say that this is a very, very well researched book. So he has actually sort of backed his argument with research and with examples. So I think my compliments to you. It's one of the best books that I have written, at least on this aspect of Chinese diplomacy. And I must confess, then there's not too much that is being written on this particular aspect. So it was a very welcome deviation from the general geopolitics and geostrategic issues that we mostly delve in. Having said that, you have written the book, and of course, you have a certain perception that you're trying to convey. If you don't mind, I will speak from the point of view of a reader, that what I take away from your concepts. So, from that point of view, I think you have very interestingly taken public diplomacy out from its more narrow definition and its sort of absolute linkage with cultural projection and cuisine and heritage and folk arts and all to a political level. And I think that is very important to understand where China is coming from and why China is getting into this kind of public diplomacy. Now, as you have very rightly said, China has a 5,000 years of continuous civilization, and they have been known for their soft power. For their creations, for their arts, for their silk, for their, wisdom, for their knowledge. So it's not that general people are not aware of the strengths of the Chinese culture, their wisdom, their civilization. What they're less aware of is where China is coming from and where it is going. And that actually leads to a lot of misperceptions. And it also gives a sort of open playing field for China opponents. In this regard, we could say, the West, led by the United States, that had a field of a time criticizing China. The Great Wall, if you remember when Nixon finally went and he was standing there with Chairman Mao, and they took him to the Great Wall, and he said, it really is a great wall. What he wanted to say that there is a division, there's a difference between us and you. And that actually, and it absolutely sort of thrived on this. And as China began to develop, I think this sort of security, they started to become a security threat. It started to become a major competition, to the West. And so therefore, they started to beat them up, particularly on human rights. saying that they, they don't practice human rights. They have no, they have a lot of child abuse. They have no women rights. They do not respect their minorities, and they do not respect their ethnic minorities and religious minorities, and so on and so forth. And you would recall that China never really responded. So it just kept absorbing all their criticism till the point they thought that it was now time to open China up in the real term of the word and start to respond to them. Now, this has actually, as late as 2019, when they actually changed their rhetoric and when the rest of the world started calling them wolf warriors. But the certain policy change has been there for a long time. You mentioned, you know, terminologies like rising China, the rise of China, the development of China, the peaceful development. I think, if I'm not wrong, and you've also mentioned in your book, this was actually Madame Zhao Beijing who had come up with this, with the slogan of peaceful rise, and then it became peaceful development. But there are a lot of other things that have down the line then indicated uh, that China is actually not a threat because it is not an expansionist power. And they started, the first thing that strikes me, I've served twice in China, and the first terminology that actually strikes me is this concept of win win cooperation. They refuse to call people allies. They have never called anybody, even we are not their allies. So, this concept that we want partnerships. So, we do not want to come and invade and take away from you, but we want to get into cooperation which is fruitful to both of us. And if you take that forward, if you sort of fast forward it to the last 2 3 years, then you see that there are a lot of initiatives and lot of not cliches, but sort of taglines which China has come up with. For example, this peaceful development for uh, it is
Harmonious world and
harmonious world, and for it's basically saying that our development is not for ourselves, but our development is there to take everybody along with us, because true development and true peace can only come, and security can only come with comprehensive development and comprehensive peace. So, if there is, and that is why they say we are not in competition, we do not want to be the number one. We just want to make sure that we are given the right to develop our people and to take them to the next level of development. Similarly, if you look at, and these are all parts of the public diplomacy which they have made as an integral part of their foreign policy. For example, what is, if you look and if you really study it very carefully, the Global Development Initiative is what? I think it is one of the biggest initiatives of public diplomacy that any country has come up with. Similarly, the Global Security Initiative, if you read it with an unbiased view, you realize that they're talking of comprehensive security through peace and development, and not
definitely.
through wars. So, not through hegemony, not through war. And similarly, now they're coming up with this concept of global civilization strategy, which also means saying that yes, we all have our differences, but at a global level, we are all humans and we all have something to offer. So let's learn from each other and let us be a huge family on earth, supporting each other rather than fighting with it. So I think these are very smart public diplomacy initiatives which have now found place right at the heart of the foreign policy of China. China has also now realized that it is at the threshold of becoming an international leader, one, one of the two. top leaders and eventually maybe overtake USA as well. So it is that realization is now also coming to them that yes, there was a time when we were only concentrating on ourselves to develop our economy, to develop our systems, to ensure that there's a unity of the people and people there's no discontent. And today, if you go to China, and all of us has have visited China and served there for a long time, but you see that satisfaction and that pride in the eyes of the Chinese for being Chinese, and that hope for the future. So they have realized that being a big part does not only mean that you practice economic diplomacy or the traditional diplomacy. It is also time to actually improve the image of the country as a civilized developed countries in the concept of the West, which is more acceptable to the West, because the Chinese are the most civilized people in the world, if you ask me. But do the people in America and in Europe consider them to be developed? No, because they judge them from their own angle. Therefore, when you talk of the concept of, you mentioned it too, uh, communism with Chinese characteristics, what does it say? It basically says, and nowadays they're bringing in a lot. If you watch China closely, a lot of these sayings and speeches of Chairman Mao. So the last time I was there, they would quote it everywhere. That conversation between the Soviet leader and Chairman Mao, and that is where they parted ways because the Soviets wanted a universal kind of communism, which is sort of one size fit all kind of communism. And in that he said, you need to bring more communism to China. On which President Chairman Mao had said, we do not have to bring communism to China. We need to bring China to communism. And that is where this concept of, communism with Chinese characteristics actually came out. And without really saying it, it says that China is a democratic country. It believes in the growth and development of its people. It believes in the rule of law, in freedom, in justice, in accountability. Those are the Chinese sort of philosophical moorings and traditional moorings. And it is these wisdom pearls that we bring to communism, and we develop our country. And that is, and now again, very often you would hear in Chinese discourse saying that the front and center of all Chinese development and Chinese effort is the last individual in the last small village of China. So all our policies are centered towards the individual and his well-being and his growth. And now, after 2019, when they were 70 years old, if you read the speech that finally, Hu Jintao, not Hu Jintao, President Xi Jinping delivered was light years apart from what these speeches were after Mao and till the last president. And that was because they had achieved what they wanted to achieve internally: complete harmony, complete development, a very united population which has full confidence in their leadership. So they thought now it's the last leg till we get 2049, where they achieve their national rejuvenation of the motherland. They now need to get up and be counted. So all these initiatives that I've mentioned have come after 2019, because they now, and this is where they actually authorized some of their spokespersons to begin with, and some of their ambassadors in important capitals to start talking back, because China had never responded to these criticisms. So now it's not only through media, it's not only through their cultural manifestations and through their writings and books, but it is actually now the foreign service of China has taken it upon itself to rectify the wrong image, which is the misperceptions that people have in their minds, and leading from the front on that, responding to criticism by facts. That reminds me of that great saying by this one, Deng Xiaoping, who said it doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white, so long as it catches mice. So, and that I think they're applying now. So they're saying, look, I mean, I saw a very interesting, they really hit back, and I think it's a very good example of their public diplomacy. They said nothing because they said, they're doing ethnic cleansing and religious persecution of Uyghurs, for example. So what the Chinese did was they took out the data of last 20 years and they compared it with the Red Indian population 70 years ago in, for example, in USA, and the Uyghur population 70 years ago in China. And that graph, you don't really have to say anything on it, because 70 years ago, if the population was at, let's say, 10% in America, and it was 5% Uyghurs in China, then in 70 years, the Red Indian population has gone down to 0.5%, whereas the Uyghur population, which is verifiable, has gone up to 30%. So these are all very subtle ways. Again, another very, and it's all public diplomacy, which has now become the main element of their diplomacy. And I really find that brilliant. They showed a map of China surrounded by, of the region, and then in there is China, and all around China, it's studded with American flags showing where the American bases are. And underneath was written, uh, China must be stopped. It's an aggressor. And then it says they are so horrible that they have intentionally placed their country so close to our bases. It says it all. Who's the aggressor? Who's the hegemon here? And this is again, again, Deng Xiaoping once said that you need to find truth through facts. So what China is doing in its public diplomacy, making it the center of their foreign policy with all these different initiatives, is basically bringing out the truth about China through facts, and not by getting into that you did this and you said that and you are bad and I'm good. They are just over and over by example, letting out facts for people to make their own judgments. And I think one of the biggest sort of public diplomacy exercise that they have done is they've opened all of West to come to China without visas. They can get visas at the airport, and they have allowed everybody in the world to come to Xinjiang and to Tibet to see what China is about. I think what they have done with their public diplomacy has been done after decades of thoughtful reflection. And so they've taken it out of the smaller realm of soft power projection, which most of us look at public diplomacy as the projection of soft power and not as an integral element of the foreign policy. But with all these foreign policy initiatives, like and you have mentioned all of them in your book, like the security initiative, and so I think you've done a great service by pointing out and letting people understand uh, that the public diplomacy that China is pursuing, it's a broader vision, and it is very well thought out. It is not against anyone, and it's not propaganda. So it's not Soviet era propaganda that's going on. It's basically opening up China and giving access to China through facts. So I think my compliments. It's a very interesting book, and I'd recommend that everybody should read it. It's not a very voluminous book. You can read it in 2 nights. So I think it's an excellent book. Thank you very much.